Welcome to Earth Archives. If you enjoy Japanese cuisine, you're probably familiar with the sea urchin battleship roll in sushi. As a high-end ingredient in Japanese cuisine, it is a delicious delicacy in many parts of the world. But did you know that this ingredient also causes disasters? Today, let's talk about sea urchins and sea urchin deserts. Before we start the show, please subscribe, like, and ring the bell. If you can, leave your thoughts, which will help the growth of the show. Without further ado, let's get started. In Japan, sea urchins are called uni, and their gonads, the only edible part of the sea urchin, retail for up to 40,000 yen per kilogram. They can be eaten raw as sashimi or sushi, served with soy sauce and wasabi. Japan imports a large amount of sea urchin products from the United States, South Korea, and other producing countries. It is estimated that Japan consumes 50,000 tons per year, accounting for more than 80% of the global production, and Japan's demand for sea urchins has raised concerns about overfishing. The Sama Bajau people in the Philippines also love to eat sea urchins, which were once a food source for the coastal Malay community in Singapore. New Zealand also eats sea urchins raw, and local fishermen there want to sell sea urchins to Japan, but the quality gap is too large. Along the Mediterranean coast in Europe, many use sea urchins in dishes, including Italian pasta, as well as scrambled eggs, fish soup, hollandaise sauce for pies, bouillie for soufflés, and Dutch sauce seasoning for making fish sauce. It can be said that there is a tradition of eating sea urchins all over the world, but Japan really eats the most. As for the folk traditions in Denmark and southern England, sea urchin fossils are imagined as thunderbolts that can ward off lightning or witchcraft damage, and even serve as a symbol of warding off evil. Another version of the story considers sea urchin fossils to be petrified snake eggs, which can prevent heart and liver diseases, poison, and injuries in battle, and are therefore carried as amulets. According to legend, these were created in the foam produced by snakes during the midsummer season with magic. First, let's get to know sea urchins, which belong to a type of marine invertebrate called echinoderms, meaning their skin has spines. This group of animals is called echinoderms, including sea cucumbers, sea lilies, brittle stars, and starfish. Sea urchins exist in all the oceans on Earth. Some species live between the high tide line and the low tide line near the coast. Others live in the deep sea, most of them 5,000 meters below the sea surface. The deepest recorded depth for a sea urchin is 7,340 meters. Sea urchins first appeared about 450 million years ago. Among the groups that exist in today's oceans, the most advanced evolution is Sedaroidea, which appeared about 268 million years ago. These primitive sea urchins usually have thick, short, round spines. The second type of sea urchin, Euchinoidea, evolved a little later, and this subclass is considered to be modern sea urchins. Next, we come to sea urchin barrens. This is where sea urchins in the ocean eat and kill many kelp plants, turning the original kelp forests into places like deserts. The main reason is that when there are too many sea urchins, this situation occurs. And when the fish, shrimp, and other animals that originally lived in the kelp either die or leave, urchin barrens usually appear along the Pacific coast. People first noticed sea urchin deserts in the 1800s when sea otters were hunted for their fur. People killed so many sea otters that they almost became extinct. Because sea otters like to eat sea urchins, when sea otters go hunting, many sea urchins reproduce, and that's when problems arise. In addition, warm ocean currents also affect the number of sea urchins. In some places, kelp forests turn into sea urchin deserts and then regrow according to the currents of the year. In addition to sea otters, sea urchins' natural enemies include starfish. The sunflower starfish is the only animal that regularly eats purple sea urchins. As for sea otters, they prefer red sea urchins over purple sea urchins. In 2013, when a disease killed most of the starfish along the Pacific coast, it allowed more purple sea urchins to reproduce in large numbers. One study showed that between 2014 and 2019, the number of purple sea urchins in a coral reef off the coast of Oregon increased by 10,000%. The California abalone fishery was forced to close in 2018, losing up to $44 million a year. And when purple sea urchins run out of food, they try to eat each other, and in the end, they go into a dormant state, like hibernation. At this time, sea urchins do not try to reproduce, so their gonads shrink. Since the gonads are the part of the sea urchin that humans like to eat, dormant purple sea urchins are not sellable after being caught because they have no economic value. Scientists say that the warming of seawater in the early 2010s weakened the strength of kelp. In 2016, a warm tide nicknamed Blob made the seawater off the coast of California very warm, which also put sea urchins in an environment more conducive to reproduction, so they had more offspring than usual. One study showed that by the end of the 2010s, 90% of the giant algae off the coast of California had been killed by sea urchins. Biologist Dan Reed has been thinking about the relationship between sea urchins and kelp for many years. In the 1980s, he noticed something. Scientists had a location near Santa Nicolas Island off the coast of Southern California that was shifting back and forth between kelp forests and urchin barrens, but the density of sea urchins did not change. In 1985, Reed and his colleagues proposed a hypothesis. If there is enough kelp debris to feed a specific sea urchin population, these creatures will eat the kelp residue in the safe cracks and crevices on the seafloor away from predators. But if the supply of debris is insufficient, sea urchins will leave the safe zone and feed on standing kelp. The conclusion of the subsequent experiment was, when the debris is less than what the sea urchins can eat, the average biomass of kelp will decrease by 50 times, which is a big change. Once urchin barrens form, they persist. These sea urchins can survive for a long time without eating too much. Once it becomes urchin barrens, there really is no chance for the kelp to come back. Because sea urchins eat standing kelp, the supply of debris decreases, which in turn leads to sea urchins consuming more standing kelp forests. With the disappearance of kelp forests, the habitat of sea urchin predators such as lobsters decreases, which makes the number of sea urchins even larger. Sea urchins will stay there until they reach the density threshold that allows diseases or other control measures to enter. As for how to solve the urchin barrens problem, scientists conducted tank and marine experiments on lobsters and other animals to see if they would eat enough purple sea urchins to help the kelp forest regrow, but the results only had a little effect. The best solution is still to rehabilitate sea otters. In places where sea otters return, such as the Juan de Fuca Strait, sea otters eat enough sea urchins, which allows the kelp forest to regrow. There are also some companies that hire red abalone divers to collect purple sea urchins and bring them to controlled marine ranches, where they can be fed until they are healthy enough to be sold for human use, which is a better solution. What do you think about sea urchins? Are they a delicacy or a destroyer of the ocean? You can comment and express your opinion. See you next time.